but we've kind of gone off track. So like Earthbound, damn near impossible until the Wii U comes around and Nintendo finally re-releases it on Virtual Console. And it's like great, but it's been like over 15 years since the game came out, and at that point, you can't really be blamed because we're gonna get some. There we go. At that point, I don't really think you can be blamed for emulating it and pirating it to play it, because what other choice is there? Going out and throwing down. I think at the time it was like over a.
Defenses had a twisted logic of their own. They could be circumvented by using the strategically placed switches, which I soon learned to recognize. Yet it was hard to escape the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake by setting in motion such a deadly system of traps, which seemed in truth more likely to claim my life than that of an invader that was not flesh and blood.
What was I saying? Yeah, it's like throwing down like what's probably like $100 at the time for this game. It's like Nintendo had been so coy about whether or not they were going to re-release it for so long. It didn't pop up on the Wii Virtual Console. Nintendo never gave a committed answer until eventually it came out on the Wii U Virtual Console. And at that point, it's like, how could you predict that it would ever come out? So it's like, no, you can't be... You really cannot be blamed for going out and pirating that, because what other choice would you have to play this game that has this... Come on. Oh, damn it. Directional attacks in this are really messing me up. It's like this game that, for all you know, will never be released. And there are other examples, like the Suikoden series. Suikoden 2, legendarily one of the most expensive games on PS1. Especially one, I think it's like the most expensive non-special edition kind of thing. It's like Elemental Gearbolt on PS1. If you have the special edition that comes in the case with the gold gun con and all of that, I was like, that will go for a lot, but yeah, that's a very rare special collector's edition. Suikoden 2 is one of the rarest standard games on the system, regularly going for over £100 used. Because it had a very limited printing, it didn't sell well at the time. But of course, you look up Suikoden 2 these days, and it has a reputation as one of the best JRPGs ever. So it's like you hear about this JRPG, legendary, considered so good, so expensive, so hard to get hold of, and beyond that, like, one of the single most interesting parts about it is it's not the traditional JRPG plot of, you know, like evil monster trying to take over the world or anything. It's very political, which is one of the most interesting things about the Suikoden series. It's politics more than anything else, which sets it apart from its contemporaries. Which in itself can be a very interesting idea. So like I said in the Sonic the Hedgehog playthrough, Phantasy Star is really interesting to me as a sci-fi JRPG, because you just do not see that many of them. And the same is true of Suikoden. How many political JRPGs do you see where the main point of it is the politics between warring nations? And like, before it was re-released on PSN, which it finally was, like I say, picking up a copy was like over £100 used. At that point, you're not paying £100 to Konami. You know, which these days nobody wants to pay £100 to Konami, but it's like, you're not paying £100 to the developers. You're paying that £100 to whoever happens to own it. So you're not supporting developers, you're supporting some random collector who has decided they want to thin their collection a little bit. And so at that point, you do have to ask the question, is it really so wrong to go online and download a copy of this game? Especially when there is no legitimate way to buy it and support the developers. And there's always going to be games like that. Nintendo were doing really well, kind of, with the Virtual Console. With the Switch out now, that's definitely taken a back seat with the Switch Online stuff, and they just keep fostering us off with various NES games that, you know, it's not like they haven't been released a dozen times in the past 10 years. But when there is a way to legitimately buy these games,
I feel as if I've been here before. I have been here before.
when there isn't a legitimate way to buy these games and support the companies that made them, then as far as I'm concerned, there is nothing wrong with going to download the ROM or the ISO or whatever and playing it that way.
I feel stronger than ever.
And let's be fair, companies these days are entirely aware of the value of retro appeal. That is why the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy happened. That's why the Spyro Reignited trilogy happened. That is why... Oh, I didn't think I was going to make that. That is why the Medieval remake is happening. And these aren't really... they're not new games, they're not new idea, not the old idea through the filter of a new lens. What they are is the old games with new graphics. That's really it. And in the case of Spyro and Crash, it's not like the old games played particularly badly. There's not really a reason to go out and buy them, as far as I'm concerned, beyond... You want to see them in the fancy new graphics, which, in itself, fair enough. Not going to complain about somebody wanting to do that. My complaint is more on the companies deciding if they put the money into putting better graphics in the games, they can charge more. They can charge more for it. It's like you can look at the Spyro trilogy on PS3 as a PS1 classic. I'm going to wait for this, actually. This PS1 classic, and you can buy the trilogy bundle together for, I think it's £8. Which is great, and the gameplay holds up really well. This is the rewind, this is us going back in time. No. Which is great, it's like £8, the 3 classic games that do still play really well. It's not as though the controls needed to be updated or anything.
Lara! Can you hear me?
The same is very much true for Crash Bandicoot. It's not as though the controls needed to be updated or anything. Medieval, I will argue against the... if the remake improves the controls, I'll be fine. I'll be all over that. Because Medieval's a solid game, but that control was not great at the time. But, it's really what it's all about. Companies are aware of the appeal of these old games. People grew up with them. And if you can hit the nostalgia button on it, people will buy them again. This is actually our first boss of the game. The human eye there is actually really horrifying. But the this fight can be really tricky, because this is our introduction to the blue spear guys, who have double-ended spears and are the first enemies in the game you can't do the jump over attack with. So you have to do something else. Like the first time I played this, the jump attack was what I was doing with everybody because it was a reliable attack. Jump, double slash, and then you get to knock them down. So the counter is really reliable. This is also the introduction to Farah as a combat mechanic, which can be really irritating because this isn't an easy fight to begin with. And you all of a sudden have to protect Farah for the first time. If it was built up to this, maybe not so bad, but legitimately one of the most difficult fights in the game the first time you do this, because the Sand King there is a kind of enemy you don't find anywhere else in the game. He's a genuinely dangerous enemy, and you've got this new enemy type where the jump attack won't work on him anymore, and so you have to reevaluate your combat style. And you have to protect Farah for the first time, and it's a lot thrown at you at once, and I'm gonna say this is probably not the best design for this. If they'd built up to... like, if they introduced any one of these three elements, and then had these elements together later after you got used to them, probably wouldn't be so bad, but introducing them all together makes it really difficult to deal with your first time. So I was saying, yeah, no, back to the original point, which this point was probably a completely different part from this that I was talking about here. But it's like, yeah, disk drives fail. And at that point, I don't think it's such a bad thing to take measures to be playing your games another way, if the option is available. It's like for years the option has been there on the original Xbox to play the games off the hard drive, to load the games onto the hard drive, save them there and play them off there. It's been there for years because the console modding scene back then was, like, the Xbox had a really big thing with it at that point. You also can't jump over here. Oh, you can jump over him. I didn't realise it. But actually knocking him down is irritating because he'll block so many attacks. There we go. And so there's various ways you can get around that.
I'm sorry.
Why?
I know what it is to lose a father.
That was not my father.
What are you doing? Stop!
And I think, for the sake of being able to play these old games, because most of these old games are not going to be re-released at any point, I don't think it's such a bad thing to do when you get down to it. It's taking a while to load there. I thought it might have crashed if the rain in the background hadn't been animated.
Done. I'll start the story from here next time.
So, this is the thanks I get for saving your life.
You don't understand. I need that dagger to undo.
To undo what I have done. Truly you must think I'm a fool.
You are right to be cautious. But fight as bravely as you may, you cannot defeat this enemy. The sands will spread. They will consume everything. I have heard it said that you are kind as well as brave. Please believe me. Help me find the hourglass.
It is in the Sultan's treasure vault, atop the Tower of Dawn.
How do you know that?
I just know. Come with me then if you insist. But I warn you, I move pretty fast. You better keep up.
So now we have Farah with us, and she will be helping us during combat, and also we get more dialogue rather than monologues from the prince. This is where a bulk of the story comes from, the characterization of these two characters.
Wait!
And how they evolve based on each other's presence.
And you were worried about me keeping up?
Well, you know, somebody got injured during the fight.
I'll cover you.
Please don't. You're liable to hit me.
But yeah, it's like, I just think, especially with these old systems, which are going to fail, and more often than not, it's because of the disk drives. Like, when it comes down to it, you should be able to, and in a lot of cases you can, fairly, like, easier than you think. God damn it. Move out of the way. Yeah, easier than you think. Have ways to play the games on the actual systems, which doesn't involve the disk drive. There's a sound cloud here. And yeah, it could be used for piracy, which in itself can be a bad thing on modern systems. I think once a system is dead and games stop being released for it, it shouldn't matter anymore. And yeah, there is the exception with Nintendo re-releasing their old libraries on their more modern systems, and PS and PlayStation having the same thing with the PlayStation, the PS1 classics, the PS2 classics. And yeah, when you have the option, I think you should buy them, particularly to support them.
Out of here!
But even then, it is also worth noting that in some cases it is still better to play the games on the original system. For example, Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga on PS2. Excellent RPG, it really is.
Now what?
It was released on PS3 as a PS2 classic, and do a quick Google search on that and find out just how well that worked. Because the PS2 classics on PS3 were very hit and miss at best.
Are you alright?
How long was I out?
Long enough. What if the sand creatures came back?
They won't. Not here anyway.
The switch to open it is on the other side. Are you alright?
Stay there! I'll try to find a way in!
So I didn't want to start talking there at any point because I knew that conversation was coming up, and I didn't want to have to pause.
Tried to steal my dagger after I saved her life. She would have left me there to die. And here I am, risking my life for her again. And why? Good question.
Because I knew that conversation was coming up and I didn't want to have to pause partway through my sentence like I just did. I should play more games with subtitles. But yeah, like Digital Devil Saga on PS3 is a PS2 classic. Runs slower than it does on Runs slower than it does on PS2. Also has major sound lag issues, which is a real problem with its voiced cutscenes that are not subtitled. And so at that point, it's like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll just play it on PS2 instead. Don't get me wrong, I own Digital Devil Saga on PS2. I own all the Shin Megami Tensei games on PS2 actually now, since I finally picked up Devil Summoner 2 a little while back. I say a little while back, it was... I'd have to check my purchase history, actually. But I've had it for a good while now. And that was the last Mega 10 game I needed on PS2. Yes, I have it on PS2. I was like, oh, well, why did I buy it on PS3? Well, you know, convenience more than anything else. I bought it fairly cheap, so that I could play it on a system without having to bust out my PS2 again. That's what a lot of this can be. It's why I own several games multiple times. For convenience. Like, yeah, I want to replay these games without having to bust out my own systems. Sometimes I just don't feel like doing that for a quick replay. But like I say, in that case, like, okay, you can buy Digital Devil Saga on PS3. The option is there. Leaving out the fact that the PS3 is a last-gen system that isn't supported anymore. Like, leaving that out. You can buy it on PS3, you wouldn't want to play it on PS3. And so at that point, I would make the argument that, like, buy it digitally on PS3, and then download it on PS2. If you have that option. Although, you also do have to take into consideration, Digital Devil Saga does not go for much at all anyway. But then you start getting into the idea of you're not really supporting developers when you buy pre-owned or even new these days, because the developers don't get the kickback from that when it's that old. So like, if you buy a new PS2 game, you're probably just buying a PS2 game that wasn't opened after being purchased. It's not like you're buying it direct from the company, like from the developer or publisher or anything like that.
Here next time.